Disability studies is a field that grows out of activism and to a certain extent personal experience. So I would say that in the first wave, a lot of the practitioners of disability studies were either people who were themselves disabled or had some close experience to disability. It does come out of the movement for disability rights, which is very much inspired by other movements for civil rights and social justice. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is modeled on civil rights legislation. Also, a lot of the activist strategies used by people in the movement are inspired by the strategies of the women's movement, the civil rights movement, other movements for justice that took place in the mid-20th century. I came to disability studies twice. The first time was when I wrote a dissertation on freak shows in graduate school, and that eventually became my first book. And I could never say exactly why I developed this fascination with freaks, but I realized that so many of the things I was interested in were connected to my childhood, and there's actually been a lot of thinking about the ways that freaks activate all kinds of primal childhood fantasies and anxieties. So I wrote this book about freaks, and it was tremendously enlivened by the fact that I got a job at Columbia and I could do archival research. Columbia turned out to be located in the best possible place to study freak shows and circuses, because New York was home to the Barnum Museum and Coney Island and all sorts of archival stuff. There's a long history of all kinds of freak displays in Times Square. So through my work on freak shows, obviously a lot of the performers in the freak show were disabled. So I became very interested in the history and culture of disability. The thing I'm very excited about for the spring is that I'll be teaching a disability studies course in the American Studies program, which has developed a real commitment to service learning. And so for the first time, this course will have a service learning component. And I was very lucky this summer to have the Van Amsen program gave me a fellow who spent the summer researching all kinds of service opportunities in the New York area and visiting different facilities. And so we narrowed them down, so we'll have a list of 3 to 5 options for the students, and they'll do 30 hours of service. One thing that was very important to me in picking the opportunities was that the students would be working directly with people with disabilities. So I had always treated disability studies like an academic subject. And then when my second child was born and I learned that he had Down syndrome, suddenly disability touched me in a personal way, a way that was completely different than I had ever thought about it before. And I'm here to tell you that being a scholar of disability studies does nothing to prepare you to be the parent of a child with disabilities. It has helped me later to make sense of my situation, but as I lay there in the hospital, none of my many years of training was of much help to me. We might believe in some rational way that someday we might become disabled, but deep in our hearts, we think it might never happen to us. And so it's always a shock when disability touches you in a personal way. People in the field are fond of saying that, of the term, the temporarily able-bodied. They make the point that we will all, if we're lucky to live long enough, someday become disabled. And therefore, disability is not a question that belongs to a particular interest group. It's something that should be of concern to everyone.